door is closed. It's spooky time. Good evening. My name is Elise Giamanco Carlson. It's my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's segment and do a series of questions and answers, wherein the duo will address topics with a diabolic twist. The topics have a diabolic twist, not the duo. You're invited to contribute your questions and messages and comments to our message board. I know last week there was a little bit of a mix-up. I didn't get to everybody's comments because some weren't coming through. We've got a little bit different setup today, and I will get to them. We still have 4 events coming up this fall. Nobody has canceled yet. We have October 10th, Hunting the Sea, which there are 2 tickets left. October 17th, Parafest, Maine. On October 24th, the duo will be at Wilson Castle for a fundraiser. That's a good time. And November 7th, they will be at Portland Paracon in Portland, Maine. So last week we ventured forth with somewhat a different approach when our guest panelist was author and renowned demonologist Keith Johnson. That worked out very well, don't you think? I think so. So continuing with that trio demonology concept, we're going to bring you a very, very special guest tonight. Most of you will recognize him right away by his name and his face. His name is Mr. Brandon Alvis. He's a regular cast member of Ghost Hunters. He'll be adding his own perspectives to the mix of the conversation tonight. That'll make things more interesting. So naturally, supernaturally, or preternaturally, whatever's your preferred term, it's endemic to paranormal research that more questions will arise than can be provided with answers. But there is value in well-informed speculation. That means good guessing. So I will bring you the trio tonight, the usual duo of Carl L. Johnson and James Annitto, and Mr. Brandon Alvis.
Good introduction, Elise.
Yeah, that's great.
Evening, everybody.
Good evening.
As Elise had said, we have 4 events coming up. Please go to demonology.org to purchase those tickets. You can go to demonology.org/events, and all the ticket links are there. So tonight we have a great guest, as Elise said, Brandon. Thank you, Brandon, for joining us tonight.
Happy to have him.
Yeah, thanks, guys. This is a pleasure. I'm a fan. This is awesome.
Good. Thank you.
So tonight, people usually hear us talk about demons. We've tried to touch on a little bit of different subjects here and there with spirit photography, spirits, what are spirits?
Angelology. We've even gotten to a little bit about UFOs and aliens.
UFOs too, yes. That was one of our first, alien abduction versus demonic possession. But tonight, we bring on a man that is making basically changing the airwaves of the paranormal right now with his scientific approach and his research. And Brandon and I share a common thing, and so doesn't he share a common thing with you, Carl. For one, I believe, Brandon, you've been involved with the field for 16 years. And myself, I've been involved with the field for 15 years. What's your similarities, Carl? Isn't it there?
I have 2 or 3 years more than that. Started when I was like a year and a half old. I have, I guess 47 years. Yeah.
47. But no, I'm saying, what is your similarities, Brandon? We're close in experience levels to the paranormal field.
We both got those 2 eye thing and the nose and this,
No, Carl. There's a show that you were on that Brandon was on too.
I was featured on the first 2 seasons of Ghost Hunters. And Brandon has been on the most recent 2. So we're bookends. We're bridging that.
You guys started it, and they're continuing it. That's pretty crazy. And, I did get to watch some of those shows. Of course, I knew Daryl much before that show. And, of course, I had to go support Daryl and the many people that were part of that show, involved in that show. And I say you guys did great work. And I love your approach because, Brandon, one of the things that we also have in common is when Carl and I first met, I actually was his tech manager.
Yeah.
And you are a tech manager. So it's pretty interesting how things roll, and I think that
it's all synchronicity. Really, it comes around,
Most definitely.
Similar interests.
So while we brought you on tonight, and not just because what you are good at,
there has to be a good reason we brought him on, not just to have a colorful guest. There's a reason.
But everybody wants to jump to the metaphysical, the preternatural aspects of demons, and I think there is a scientific approach to it. And we want to take your approach at it as well. You know, Carl and I are very well versed in science. We're not scientists though, but we want to definitely pursue the issue a little bit more and see how we can tackle this. Of course, we're not going to solve anything tonight, but we can, of course, bring a little bit to the people that are listening, the misconceptions and how science can determine things that are not demonic and maybe things that could be. So we definitely would like to bring your approach to this as well. And I think Elise, not to take too much of the time because you are our guest panelist tonight, I do believe Elise has a few things to bring up about you that she's interested in. And of course, some questions. Elise will be on the camera with us tonight. Her lovely face. We have a beautiful presence. And she'll be the moderator tonight. She has a set of questions that she'll ask, of course, Carl and I, but also Brandon as well. And we'll do the best we can to answer these questions for you guys.
Okay. Yeah, and because of Brandon's, he's renowned for taking a scientific materialistic approach, which is it sounds contradictory when you're into the field of demonology and paranormal research. How can you be a scientist and believe in ghosts and demons and all that? Well, the two can mesh, because all science was at one time magic and mystical. Then it is better understood. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to legitimize the field of demonology and bring this research into something modern, academic. It'll never be totally understood. The world cannot be totally understood, especially the higher world. But we're going to try and grasp some concept of it. See what we can replicate, reproduce scientifically. Having said that, do we have any questions, Jeff or Brandon, or do we just want to let him tell what his scientific approach is?
Definitely.
Yeah. In fact, Brandon, let me ask you that. How do you blend those two worlds of science, observational approach to metaphysics, and it seems like they, to use a redundancy, mutually exclusive. But how do you do that? How do you hook that up together?
Well, first and foremost, anytime we talk about paranormal phenomena, be that in the wide scope of what that is, right? We can talk about demonology, we can talk about ghosts and hauntings, we can talk about all these various topics, but if this phenomena is real, which I think a majority of us do believe that is the case, we should be able to document that with a scientific instrument. And that's really what it comes down to. So I've been very lucky to work with some very brilliant people over the years. I've comprised a panel of various scientists, medical doctors, engineers, these brilliant people that have really helped me remain grounded, not only in scientific principle, but logic. And these people are skeptics, but a majority of the time when people talk about skepticism and skeptics, that's a very skewed term. A lot of the people that call themselves skeptics really aren't skeptics, they're non-believers, which kind of throws a wrench into the whole situation, because if someone really is a skeptic, they don't go in biased. They go in wanting to find proof of something that may exist. They don't go in automatically not believing, right? So I've been very lucky to work with some brilliant people, one of them being Dr. Harry Clore. He's the only person in history to receive 2 PhDs simultaneously in any discipline. And him and I have been working together for a decade now, and he's really helped me remain grounded in scientific principle and logic. But it's really going out there and trying to find that natural explanation first, right? And then when we're left with something we can't explain, we have to analyze that data and consult that third party, from a technical industry, be it whatever that data is, to really look into it deeper. But if we talk about demonology and we start to talk about the scientific aspect, we have to look even at the Catholic Church, the process they go through to deem someone possessed and go through with an exorcism, right? They have a very methodical process where they go through psychological testing, scientific testing, medical testing, in order to really prove that this person or said person is possessed. So there is a scientific methodology in certain different religions that goes first or is practiced first prior to going in and looking into the supernatural aspect.
It's definitely a good point. I think one of the things that demonology has over some paranormal enthusiasts, because I've heard you say it, I've said it, Carl said it, Elise has said it. It's a pseudoscience. It's looked at as so. It's not very well respected within the scientific community because of the gullibility that people have. But the one thing that Carl and I do, especially myself, because I am a deacon with the Catholic Church, when I assess these cases, we do use psychotherapists, we use physicians, MDs, we take that approach, not just because we also want to prove the natural before the preternatural, but dealing with people is a liability. You're dealing with people. So you have to make sure you're not leading astray, because dangers could happen from that. There have been investigators that have gone in people's houses and told people that there's demons in this person. And one of the biggest cases is in Florida, where they burnt this woman and she survived, but they put her on fire to burn the demons out of her. So these things happen. And Carl and I specifically, as duo Daemonologie, and there's other demonologists that do it, that work with the Catholic Church, but we approach these methods because you have to exit the natural out before you can even jump to any conclusion that it is paranormal. Because I truly believe that 99% of, maybe a little lower, but I believe a high 90% of it is the human mind, psychologically, elements that occur. And I definitely want to hit on one more thing, not to take too much of the limelight, but you said skeptics, and I talk about him a lot, and there's a man named Joe Nickel. I love Joe Nickel's research. I love the things he does. He's never really came out and said he's come across something paranormal. Maybe it's more the perception he doesn't want to, but he's been a part of a lot of things and a lot of documentation. Man, of course, said the Jack the Ripper diaries were a hoax, and it was proven. So, this man's very smart. So I like to take that approach too, especially more now that I've matured. I've come less gullible to understanding what we deal with.
Yeah, Joe Nickel, for example, he's an empiricalist. So he's like looking for like pragmatism, level grounded and all that. But I'd like to ask him sometime, what is really do you have a belief in the paranormal, paranormal, and paraphysical, just what his views are. But we have an esteemed guest, so we can ask him more.
Yeah, definitely. So Elise, you had some interest, some questions. Would you like to start with some?
Well, there were a couple of things I found when I was looking you up. A mention of your film, Cemetery Park. I know it's a little bit off the subject of demonology here, but being a cemetery conservator, I'm very interested in the preservation and repair and just the care of cemeteries and the stories that they tell and the people that are there that are not forgotten because their stories are on the stones, as they say. So can you tell me a little bit about what that film is about?
Well, yeah, no, it's interesting you bring that up, because when it comes to, conservation, and you talk about the stories that are written on these stones, unfortunately, there's a 7-acre pioneer cemetery in Ventura, California, that was desecrated by the city in the 1960s. They ripped out over 600 headstones and threw those headstones into a canyon and flooded that canyon. And they did this illegally, without the permission of the families. And we're talking about 3 different cemeteries, right? You have a Jewish section, a Protestant section, a Catholic section. There's Native Americans buried there. There's Taoists, any type of person from any walk of life. You can literally take, a dart and throw it at a map, and it'll probably, or most likely, hit a country that, someone in that cemetery was originally from. So we're talking about immigrants, pioneers, as well as, veterans that are buried in the cemetery. And it was illegally desecrated in the 1960s by the city of Ventura. And this film exposes that entire, atrocity, and really goes really deep into what they did. And to this day, that cemetery still has over 3,000 people buried there in unmarked graves, and it's now a dog park. And even people that grew up in Ventura, California, don't even know that it actually is a cemetery. A lot of people believe it to be, oral legend or urban legend. And I thought that was the case when I first moved here about 7 years ago. Started looking into the story and found out that, yes, the city of Ventura, in a land grab, desecrated the cemetery and never really apologized or, fixed their actions. So that's really what the film's about.
That's so interesting. In my town, well, actually in our state, which is probably about as big as Ventura County, I know of at least a couple of cemeteries that were taken over that were, very small ones, just a couple of scoops of construction equipment, and it's gone, and nobody said anything, only someone happened to remember it was a cemetery when they were a young boy. And, we go looking for it years later. Someone asks, where's my, great-grandfather buried? Like, oops, there's a road there now. So yeah, I find that very interesting. Thank you very much.
Yes, in the states of, the cities in the state of Rhode Island, cities of Cranston, Rhode Island, cities of Johnston, people are literally driving over an on-ramp over a cemetery, over interred remains, and there's a landfill that edges another cemetery that's been utterly obliterated, covered over. And there's really not much people can do about it. Some bodies have been found and recovered, but there's others that just won't be.
Right.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting. The topic itself, at least here in Ventura, with this situation, the fact is that they publicly, promoted what they were doing by, taking out over 300 headstones and leaving some of the over 3,000 bodies there. But years later, cities throughout the country started writing Ventura, asking how they pulled this off and how they went about going in and virtually taking this land from these people who very much owned these plots. And the last burial was in 1944. I mean, we're not talking that long ago that the last burials were taking place. And so Ventura's actions really created this nationwide problem that we see throughout the country. I know that probably in the East Coast where you guys are, this was probably happening earlier. But at least with Ventura, what they did in the 60s kind of started spreading through, the Midwest and the South. And I have multiple letters that were recovered through a Freedom of Information Act where cities wrote to Ventura saying, hey, we want to do the same thing to our pioneer cemeteries. We find it to be a really great piece of real estate, and we want to find out how you did it. So it really caused a chain reaction, which is very unfortunate because, preserving our nation's history is very important. First and foremost, but I mean, these are, again, immigrants and pioneers, veterans, people from all around the world. There's a Congressional Medal of Honor winner buried in the cemetery. This guy fought in the Indian Wars, fought against Cochise, and was given this Congressional Medal of Honor by Ulysses S. Grant. So there's such history associated with this place, and unfortunately, these people now are in unmarked graves, so their family can't even find where they are to this day.
It's crazy. So, Elise, do you want to hit the first question off based upon science and demons?
Science and demons. Well, the first question I saw on the board that I put up a little prematurely, I will put up again because I did that. It is about demons. It comes from April, and she asked if Brandon has ever encountered a demonic entity.
I don't believe I have, actually, so far. Luckily, I haven't really put myself into a situation to have such an encounter. I've done homeowner cases over the years, but I've mainly investigated historical properties throughout the country. But I have not encountered what I would believe to be a demonic entity per se. I've come across a few nasty human spirits, a few entities that cause some mischief and maybe play themselves off to be something bigger than they really are. But I don't think I've really encountered that yet myself, and I'm lucky to say so.
Yes, I think there's too many people that hope for it, to hope to experience that. And sometimes you get what you ask for, but it's not what you hope for. And unfortunately, we usually tell in our stories, I didn't believe in demons until I experienced a case that I was brought in by a psychologist, which is, of course, the reverse role of things. But yeah, no, I think too many people hope for it. They hear about evil because of the aspects of dualism and Greek philosophy, and of our ethics and morals, and of course our religions and our civilizations that have a concept of evil. And I think so many people are enthralled with it because of also entertainment as well, and the movies that are out there and the shows that are out there that exploit.
It's kind of given us a concept of what a demon is, the modern concept, a zeitgeist of what a demon is, evil personified, dressed up in a personality.
Yeah, most definitely. So that was a good question, April, and we hope that you never come across a demon as well, Brandon. It's just not a case that most people will walk away with.
But if you do, let us know, please.
Yeah, definitely.
It's like crashes in the field. I don't want that to happen, but I want to be there to see it if it does. Somebody else.
Right. No, I leave it up to the experts. You know what I mean? You guys have been handling cases like this for many years and been involved in that.
Experts in the unknowable, you might say.
Yeah, there you go. But for me, luckily, like I said before, I have not done that myself.
Because it gives you the heebie-jeebies, to put it mildly. These are experiences that stay with us, and they give us a little that sense of trepidation, like, oh, is this going to happen again? Are we ever going to walk into this again? Now, Brandon, would you? I don't think you'd qualify yourself as a skeptic. It's a loaded term. For instance, our hostess, Elise, a moderator, she is a realist, which is a little different from being a skeptic. I think skeptic is a loaded term. It indicates someone who just doesn't believe or feels they're too smart to be fooled. But and it's limiting. But realist is more of a grounded person who just is slow to believe things and accept things, but knows there's something more than what we see to this world. So, are you skeptic? Are you realist? Do you adopt a label at all?
Like you said, I think the term skeptic has kind of been hijacked over the years, because a classical skeptic is, again, someone that wants to find proof that something exists, not going in biased, which seems to be the case a lot of times with people that claim to be skeptics. For myself, I need to see empirical evidence or data, factual data associated with something that is considered unexplained, which is, in reality, something that's very easy to do. Unfortunately, we're in a field right now where a lot of people are going out there and mocking the TV shows and using these goofy gadgets that are made in garages that are giving people tremendous false positives. And these gadgets, these goofy devices are made because it's going to fill 42 minutes of a TV show. And unfortunately, people take that as gospel, and they go out and they utilize these devices, and they believe they found proof of ghosts or entities, whatever it may be. So for me, I'm more on the side of scientific principle and logic, where I want to use instrumentation from other technical industries that give me empirical evidence and factual data, something I can actually take to a third party to be tested and looked at by someone that actually knows what they're doing, to tell me if it's something that's a natural occurrence or something that we can't explain. So I'd say, a realist. I'm someone that needs to see some kind of proof, data, and it's something I strive to do every day, and something I'll continue to do throughout the rest of my investigations.
I think you said a great thing, Brandon. We know many, of course, Carl and I and yourself and Elise as well. We know many people that create these devices, and we're not saying anything bad about you, but the one thing that you have to understand for people that are listening, and I believe Brandon made a post, and I actually posted on it, a very lengthy reply to his post about how we use these devices, how static electricity can happen with temperature change. Magnetic poles create a natural EMF at a regular basis. And we use these devices at a constant. They're not meant to use at a constant. Like, I am an HVAC foreman. I work with air. I have a license to work with air. It's crazy. But people don't use these technical aspects. Like, everybody thinks Carl and I going with EMF meters and ghost boxes and REM pods and these people's homes. We don't,
A lot of colored lights.
Yeah, and we don't, because we understand the science behind these devices. And unfortunately, if a phone can turn one of these devices off, what else can turn the devices off?
If it's not malleable about your environment, household things can affect them like that.
So
absolutely.
And most people don't go in a home, shut the breakers off. They don't do any of those things. So you're always getting that contamination. You're always getting that false positive. And, I think, Hans Holzer created a lot of that approach as the first ghost hunter technically, but I always like to look at Harry Price's methods too, because of the way he did things outside of the technical realm, because that was a little bit more harder to kind of manipulate, but in some ways you still could.
What do you think of Harry Blackstone's methods, though?
Harry Blackstone's?
He's a magician.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the illusionist, man. That a lot of it goes on, unfortunately, in this field, illusion.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's why I always have been so respectful of Harry Houdini. In his book he wrote in 1924, and everyone knows what he's done. But I hope everyone in this field knows what he did. I mean, this guy went in front of the Senate trying to bust fake spiritualists. I mean, I think that can be very relevant to this day. Maybe not in the spiritualist sense, but I guess it kind of is a form of spiritualism that we're dealing with now, because what these people are doing, it's almost become a religion within itself, right? These people have this, this ideology where they watch these shows and they become so consumed by this trickery that they go out and they believe this is the truth. This is how it works. This is gospel. And I always admire what Harry Houdini did. But again, I think you're 100% right. But I think if we go back to the basic points and the fundamentals of having to look and observe all the environmental conditions associated with location, I think that's something we have to do in every investigation. everything from moon phase to temperature, pressure, humidity, all these things, EMF, turning off the breaker boxes, knowing your environment, knowing what the wiring in the house will do, what the natural environment, how it'll affect your equipment is something we need to really look into as a field and kind of put in some kind of ethics, standards, and protocol associated with that, just to have that basic fundamentals down to know, hey, look, if it's outside of what we know as man-made contamination or environmental contamination, that's where we can start to collect that factual data. And I think that's something that we have to take seriously.
Yeah, and I think anybody can run away with this. And Brandon, if you do, make sure you include Duo and Lisa. I'm just kidding. But I think one thing that I don't think that nobody has done, I think it's interesting to me, is build like a Faraday cage around the house, turn everything off, and see if there's no outside influences, because the ionosphere bounces back radio waves. What are we getting? The
ionosphere, it's a canopy that really, exists and cloaks our world, and that creates a bouncing effect, a shield. So
let's put it.
It's no different. It's no different than the paranormal field. It's just a huge echo chamber.
Yeah, a Faraday cage around the house. It's a pretty interesting idea if it could be pulled off.
Wasn't it simpler when we were just messing with Ouija boards? And,
Right? I know. Take it back to the old school. Use a little powder, huh? Use a little powder and string and candles.
Doors. Yeah.
Go back to the London Ghost Club days. Why not?
Yeah, Charles Dickens, Charles Darwin, man, those are the guys, man. 1820 that was?
Right, London Ghost Club. They're still in existence to this day, apparently. I have not yet to meet someone still associated with the London Ghost Club, but I hear it still exists. That's something that would be interesting to look into, actually.
Yeah, they do have an active president. Yeah, their website still goes. I would love to meet somebody from their organization. Just to think, man, Charles Dickens, the guy that really created Christmas in America, was a part of Ghost Club, was a paranormal investor, and most people.
And what's his most famous, most often told story? A Christmas Carol is a ghost story.
That's right. A majority of his stories were ghost stories, really, if you think about it. So
he wrote an article called "These Haunted Houses" or something like that, I believe. And it was just like how you can't go into a house perceiving it to be haunted because there's many other reasons, but that doesn't disappoint the fact that it could be a haunting.
That sounds like what we're talking about today, what we're trying to achieve today in our approach.
Exactly. I think that they set a very great tone, which I think has been kind of forgotten to this day. And, again, like I think what we've been talking about here throughout this conversation is the fact that there's an oversaturation of the shows and media, television shows, movies, and it's really set this precedence for the people in the field where they believe it wholeheartedly, and they go out there and they mimic it, and they use it as something they believe very much. And hopefully one day that mindset can change a bit and just allow people to be a bit more open-minded and really create their own methodology.
So we're at the half-hour mark. We go to 9. So Elise, let's get some hard questions in.
Okay, we do have some more questions. We have a husband and wife that are watching, and they have both asked questions. But first, Erica asks, our home is haunted. We have major activity now. How can you tell if it is a human spirit or demonic?
Well, Brandon, as you are our panelist guest tonight, you get the first hit at this.
Well, that's always going to be tough. I mean, for me, again, I don't have a lot of experience when it comes to the demonic side of this field. So for me, I'm going to go in there and try to find, again, like I said, empirical evidence and data associated with a case. But as far as it being a human spirit or something that's inhuman, that's something I would not be able to determine myself, at least with my experience. So I think I'd leave that up to you guys. You guys are the ones that know more about that than I do.
All right, we'll field that question then.
You want to answer it quick and fast? We could be on that question all night.
I think the answer is time. You wait it out, and it will reveal itself. If it's really hostile and kind of beyond what a ghost would do, and it gives you that really bad gut feeling and that persists and everything, it will reveal itself to be one or the other. It's subtle at first, but just time will. You don't want to really wait it out and deal with that. Also, if you tell a ghost to leave, generally it will. It'll lessen the activity. You tell a demon to leave, it's just going to get angry. So it's you have to kind of be there and experience this to really determine that. You may not even ever know, But wait it out. See, if it's demonic, most likely it will reveal itself.
I can't really go out too much on that. Basically, it will take time. One will be more hostile. One will be less theatrical at the beginning, as even though most people think a demonic case will be cups moving, stuff moving right away, but it's very manipulative and parasitical. So it is going to play to your worst fears, and it's going to any way it can get into the nooks and crannies, and usually starts affecting some individual more than the whole.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's somebody that's what they call the target. Someone will be targeted. It could be a child, could be the owner of the house, or the director of the household. But somebody's going to get it more.
Yeah, definitely. Elise, another question.
Unmute myself here. Another question, huh? I have a few questions that were asked before the show. They asked if I could ask these. So let's see. If a demon is properly driven out and banished from a dwelling, can it ever return to that location?
Brandon, putting you on the spot.
Oh,
Demon talking.
man.
Sorry, we're trying to get away from it, but we just can't avoid it.
I would hope not. I would imagine they possibly can. I mean, again, I don't have too much experience with, demonic cases or dealing with these type of entities myself, but I don't see why they wouldn't be able to come back in some capacity. I think that's kind of up to a person's own will, or like you said, it's going to target somebody. And there's the infestation period and whatnot, of things I've read about in the past. But I guess it's really about the person that's being targeted, and maybe even the people that maybe invited something like that in, I would guess.
So in that same retrospect, even though you necessarily haven't dealt with demons, do you believe that it is possible if ghosts and demons did exist? Because of course, we do believe in demons, but for some that have never experienced ghosts or demons, it's all hypothetical theory. It is truly not fact and reality. Do you believe these things can get pushed out? Do you think that's possible? Even spirits? Do you think spirits can
banish,
warded off? Do you believe that's possible?
Absolutely. I think it really all comes down to a person's personal belief system, right? So it's really about that person's will and the strength of their will and the way if they're willing to let something like that go. That's what I think. Again, am I right? Most likely not. I don't know. Who knows? But I think it's really comes down to a person's will and the strength of that will in order to get rid of something like that.
Yeah, Carl, do you agree? What have you observed in 47 years?
Yeah, sometimes if properly handled, and it also requires a commitment on the part of the person who's being affected. They have to have a belief that this thing can be banished. But I think effectively it can be driven out. Just give it a hostile environment, like a plant won't grow on unfertile soil. So if it's you create a bad environment for the entity, it's not going to stick around, and there are ways to do that. So yeah. I'd say yeah.
I'd like to jump, and I bring it up a lot, but I think it's very easy for people to swallow because I can get a bunch of technical mumbo jumbo about what occurs. But there was a thought pattern called New Thought, and something that developed out of it was laws of attraction. And with laws of attraction, I think it's very similar to that with will, volition, your own volition. And basically is if you have a positive mindset, and you're wanting a positive outcome, you're going to do any positive formation to do so. If you allow any negative circumstances to derail you, then basically you're going to be derailed. As Carl and I talk about all the time, when it comes to the point of oppression or obsession or even possession, there is usually that what we have dealt with, there is some sort of personal trauma that is kind of invoked the issue. So that has to be kind of overcome before anything else can be chopped off, in my opinion.
Right. I read a book from Malachi Martin years ago, Hostage to the Devil. That's probably a book that I've read that's about demonology and obviously about his time being an exorcist in the church. So that was one of the main points he actually brought up in that book and talked about that. Again, I think a lot of it comes down to a person's belief system and their will, like you said, but you can change that environment for them. You can get rid of that, but I guess there's a personal commitment that has to be met in that situation.
Yes, you properly pronounced his name too, Malachi Martin.
Mm-hmm. Malachi Martin, that's right. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Great movie, great book. Definitely very, very interesting man, very knowledgeable, very well. And He's wrote. Yeah, he's authored many books. He's authored many books. There you go. I changed the whole thing. Authored many books. There you go.
And he was fantastic, and very strange death as well. That's a whole strange scenario around that as well. But interesting man, interesting life. A Jesuit and someone that I guess was excommunicated from the church, actually, which is funny enough. It's crazy story. Very interesting man, definitely.
Oh yeah, he was excommunicated because of certain things he transpired to do, and spoke against the Catholic Church and his opinions. And of course, when you do that, unfortunately, sometimes
there's repercussion to that.
There is repercussions. Yeah. Elise, you have another question?
Just feed it to us.
I do have some questions. There is one that is for Brandon. It was been asked a couple of times, so I thought I would read it. Candace would like to know, Brandon, has anything ever followed you home?
Yeah, actually, I have been followed home, and I actually documented that, funny enough. I used to investigate a location called Heritage Junction Park for a number of years, and one of the houses in this collection of historical buildings was the Newhall Ranch House. And a number of occasions, I think I investigated that location for about 7 years. And multiple times I recorded this voice of a man that's kind of wailing out in pain. And later I found out that Henry Mayo Newhall, who built this house, died because he was actually bucked off of a horse and broke his ribs and had this really horrible death over a number of days. But that voice I recorded in the Newhall Ranch House, I recorded in my own home 95 miles away. I got back home from an investigation, walked into my apartment at the time in Bakersfield, California. And as soon as I walked in, I witnessed the closet door in my living room open up by itself. And being I had the equipment in my hands, I hit the record button on my recorder. I set it down on my stairs and walked back down about 2 minutes later, walked outside, pressed play, and I heard the exact same voice, the same welling out in pain sound that I recorded at the Newhall Ranch House. And I actually had that tested through spectrum analysis by an audio engineer. And not only was it in a frequency we could not explain, it was not a stray cell phone frequency, not a stray radio frequency, but it was actually the same frequency that I recorded 95 miles apart. So yes, I did get followed home once, and I actually did document that. And it was a spooky experience, that's for sure. And like we were talking about earlier, Carl mentioned, I walked into my apartment. I said that you're not welcome here. If you want to communicate with me, we can communicate at the Newhall Ranch House, and simply left. That was it. That was the last experience I had.
Well, yeah, it's never fun. I think one of the things that I don't get, especially as somebody that works a career outside of doing ministry work and demonology work, working with Carl.
Isn't your main source of income doing this kind of thing?
No, it's definitely not. One of the things I don't get is for people, bring haunted objects into their house or investigating their own homes and asking the question. I always had the mentality of you leave work at work and you
absolutely
at home. So I've never got it, but I did have something follow me home, and it was definitely not fun. But I also tend to lead towards that was my own ego. I thought I was untouchable. I thought nothing could follow me home, and sometimes what you think is not what is right, and
right.
It's not a good experience, especially if yours seems like it was very minute, and thankfully it went back. But sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's not.
I know you're 100% right. And again, I never ever advise to investigate your own home. Something I've never done. I do not own haunted objects. It's not something I'm into. I think it could be a very dangerous situation for a lot of people. So when I walked in and I saw this, when I hit record on my audio recorder, I did not ask a single question. I wasn't trying to pry into the situation. I just wanted to see what I could record in a very short period of time. And I just wanted to, walk out and see if what I experienced was real. I was very tired at the time. I was, exhausted, deprived of sleep. And that happened. And I heard that voice and I walked back in immediately and made that announcement in my home and went away. So I got very lucky in that situation, but I would never advise, like you said, James, ever to investigate your own home or to acquire haunted objects. That's a huge fad in this field right now, which I think is so dangerous. And a lot of times I think it's a fraud. I think it's very fraudulent a lot of times. A lot of these people have these haunted dolls, which, let's be honest, is complete bullshit 95% of the time. They're trying to make a buck out of it. right?
Mhm.
Which we know they are, which is sad. It's very sad to see it. But again, I wouldn't advise it. Even if you do think it is haunted, why do you want that in your home? What are you getting out of it? To put it on Facebook and put a camera on it and get 50 people watching it overnight? Who gives a shit? Like, really, what's the purpose?
Take on dolls
I
and
love it, man.
inanimate objects, man. We're so on the same page.
I just don't understand it. I don't get it. You know, I not long ago I saw two grown men arguing over a haunted doll and how this doll required first class to fly to Las Vegas. Like, I just don't understand it. It just blows my mind. It blows my mind.
Oh, I love it, love it, love it.
Not to plug our own show, but after that situation, not to name names, but we actually did a special edition of our podcast called Haunted Dolls. And we talked about that because one of the things that I don't get is, of course, Divics are part of civilization, Judaic belief.
Sure.
But when the Divic box came out on eBay, this wine box, and it just became a total fad, and everybody.
That's how it started. The whole mystique about the Divic box. It was on eBay, you know.
Yeah,
and there was a huge motion picture made about it as well, if we remember, produced by Sam Raimi, one of the most brilliant horror directors and producers. You know, Evil Dead series and all that. So I mean, it becomes this Hollywood-esque thing, and people want to jump on that gravy train in some way. It's crazy to me. I don't understand it. I think it's such a dangerous precedent that people are setting. They just want notoriety for things that can be very dangerous. But let's be honest, a lot of the times it's just complete fabrication. But again, I mean, I never thought in my 16 years of doing this, which is not very long in any way, shape, or form, I never thought I would see two grown men arguing over a doll publicly like that. I mean, that to me was one of the most embarrassing moments this field has ever had, and I hope that we can get past that.
One of those pulling on one arm, the other one's got a leg. I'm surprised they didn't rip that thing to pieces.
Exactly.
Coming out of that, oh my God, I would cap all that doll mystique, you know. I love it. This is good. Yeah, that's gold.
it is gold. It is gold.
I'm so glad you brought up that point, Brandon. Yeah.
Oh, I'm passionate about it because I mean, I sit back and I watch this. I want nothing more than this field to be taken seriously. I do everything I can in my power. Again, I'm just one guy in a sea of thousands upon thousands of people, but I want to do everything I can to step out of the shadow of pseudoscience, to bring in these professionals from various technical industries, scientists, engineers, medical doctors that can step in and really help us step out of that shadow and really take this to the next field. This is the next great frontier, right? You have the exploration of space. You have the exploration of the ocean. Life after death is that next great exploration, I believe. And I think that we'll get there with the advancement of technology and people being more open-minded. But again, it's just such a hill to climb. It's such a hard thing to do. And going back with the Catholic Church, this methodology and this protocol they have with going through this rigorous scientific and psychological testing prior to talking about exorcism and possession, I think that's something the field needs to adapt and something that needs to be looked at and modeled after. I think that's something that's very serious.
Definitely. I think, I'll let Carl take some of this too, but I don't know if licensure will ever be an applicable thing in our time frame of doing this, but I definitely think, of course, if more people used licensed trades and physicists and doctorates and PhDs within their investigations.
Bringing their respective disciplines to the search.
Yeah, like have an electrician. If you know an electrician, have an electrician do a sweep in the house. Bring air guy in. Bring, I want to say maybe a physicist in, but, bring these people in if you have these questions of this could be
Probably
it.
not a hairstylist or a dog groomer.
Definitely
but,
not.
Those are disciplines too.
And I don't say this to be mean. I've always wanted to say this. Maybe I'll say it tonight because it's the
You
greatest.
stop saying you're let out.
But I love when somebody like myself, and of course Carl and yourself and Elise, who all have academic backgrounds to some extent or have worked with people of academic backgrounds, and we get in arguments with people that push carts for a living about ghosts. It's maddening to me. It's like, there's so much research out there. There's so much you can actually get involved with to actually make yourself a step closer to being a respectable part of this field. And that's like you do, Brandon. You work with a lot of like-minded people that are in the scientific community, and that's applaudable. So don't Carl and I, so does not Elise.
Yeah.
And more people need to do that.
Yeah, no, it's crucial. It's crucial. We have to have it.
The most
We have
profound
to have it.
mysteries of creation, of life and death, and people gloss over them like it's nothing. Like most people, you're into that ghost stuff. I don't really believe it. It's never been proven. Ghost. Yeah, most of these people that I've known are churchgoers. Not, I commend that, but you're embracing a belief in a higher power. You have a whole cosmology about the invisible realm, and yet these people have trouble believing in ghosts. I mean, considering the marvel of our world and our universe, and ghost isn't that too much of a stretch. It's we're contemplating our own destinies, our creation, our origins, and where we're headed.
Well, this is a true statistic. Well, 40, and it seems low, but it's pretty high actually as well. But 44% of people in America believe in ghosts. 44%.
Okay. That's not quite half, but
it's not quite half.
It's a substantial margin.
It's a substantial margin, though. Yeah, but there is a larger margin that don't believe in ghosts.
Yeah, we got to
exactly. No.
At least we have another. We're wriggling down, so let's get a few questions in, and because it's been a great discussion so far.
I've got one question that came in one of the other feeds that you guys can't see the question, so I'll have to read it. An EMT asks, occasionally I see people that have died while in my care as a paramedic trauma nurse in the military. It's for a split second. I always wonder if it's spirits or my PTSD.
Interesting. That's interesting. I've read a lot and actually have spoken to a lot of people that are in hospice care or EMTs that they've had experiences that they can't explain. And like this person said, is it PTSD? Is it some kind of psychological aspect to, having to relive these moments over and over? Maybe, but there's obviously a pattern and a correlation here with the people that are involved with this either end of life care or being around, traumatic situations where people unfortunately pass away. But I think that pattern, that correlation is something that's hard to ignore. And that would be something to be very interesting to study within itself.
Carl?
I have to share something about this. My brother-in-law was a long-term security personnel at Twin River Casino in Rhode Island. And he is such a grounded person. You would never hear a ghost story from him. That's why he's so convincing. He had an experience about 10 years ago where he was working security and doing the overnight shift. And one of their staff, his coworker, expired from a massive coronary. He had a congenital heart defect, and it just caught up to him, and he died there on the spot. Well, they, within a minute or so of his seizure, and he was being loaded. His body was being loaded onto the ambulance, but you could tell that the man was already expired because they weren't hurrying. But you see this man who had died. He's walking behind the gurney that's carrying his body, transporting it into the back of an ambulance. The man is walking there in back of him, and then he gets up to the ambulance and he vanishes. And they had that on the security camera. And what the disposition of that film is almost as remarkable as that experience, and my brother-in-law Joe, he knew this, he saw it. He's telling me about it. He'll still tell that story. The man's image within a week vanished off of that film. Off of the security camera film. It was just gone. Faded and went away.
Yeah. As
if he was no longer part of this world. So that's just as remarkable as what happened there.
Yeah. I definitely think it's possible. Of course, none of us were there, so we couldn't really not say if it was paranormal or PTSD. It's good to go get checked out, see if that's a hallucination that's been happening. But because you should always check the medical first aspects. But a lot of anthropologists will say the only reason that there's spirits out there is because the fact that we want there to be afterlife. We don't want to die because we're so self-centric as humans. It's not necessarily a bad idea or theory on their part, but I tend to also believe that I know a lot of people that are EMTs, doctors, and there have been scientific studies on souls leaving bodies at death. So it's interesting to me. But do I believe, of course, it could occur? Yes, definitely. But there's so many things to look at, so many different levels.
But this gentleman is having consistent experiences. He's seeing them for that split second, which is how I've seen sincere, just for that instant there. And I tend to think it's legitimate.
Of course.
That he's seeing something that's transcendental.
Yeah.
We can't know, but I do believe he is.
Yeah.
I highly suspect he is.
Elise?
All right. As I look for another question, that's one of the things I read about when I was looking into the history of, paranormal research. With the people that started who were trying to document activity. That was the number one thing that the stories that people would come up with in times of, slower communication. They'd know that someone died, and then they'd get a letter from England a week later saying they died, but they saw them crossing the street in front of them in the United States. All stories like that. So I just wanted to throw that in. Melissa asks, if people can invite in a demon, can they also invite in an angel with an equal success rate? I like that.
Oh God, I like that.
That's you guys right there. That's out of my realm right there.
All right. Okay, quick answer. Let's get a few more questions in before 9 o'clock. Yes, I do believe so. I think you can invoke or conjure demons, and I think same aspect you can, of course, invoke or in a word conjure angels.
Call in,
summon. I think it's plausible. I think I do know people that believe they talk to angels. And I can't say that they're wrong because they've said things that are out of this world, but they shouldn't have known those things and they knew it. So yeah, it's possible.
The angels be commanded and constrained, as was believed in at least Elizabethan times in England. They used to harness angels for angel magic, but I don't. That can't be done. But I do believe, with sincerity, it might not work every time. You can't automatically summon an angel, but you can plead, you can petition an angel and not pray to them, but you can call in an angel. They tend to show up of their own, it seems of their own volition with no real consistency. But yeah, it's, if you want an angel around, it doesn't hurt to ask.
Yeah, and most people, and it is said to believe that most people have a guardian angel or spirit guide. So there you go.
Yeah. Plausible.
Well, that question was answered by our two demonologists, so I'll come up with a question for you, Brandon. Tell me about your new book with Mustafa.
Yeah, I can't give too much information away at the moment, unfortunately, but we did sign a publishing deal with Llewellyn Worldwide, which is a great publisher. They've been around for about 118 years, published some amazing books over the years, and we're very excited. And we're going to talk about a range of topics. Obviously, it's paranormal related, but we're going to really go into the science side of things, and we're very excited about it. Very excited, and can't wait to get it out there. I think it's going to be a breath of fresh air for a lot of people out there. Again, like we've talked about tonight, you see a lot of instances where it's a lot of rinse and repeat with the field. It's a huge echo chamber. You're seeing a lot of the same methods being utilized, a lot of the same false positives being relied on as evidence and data. And I think we kind of break into that a bit and break that down and talk about that. So we're really excited to release that in 2021.
Excited to read that.
We look forward to reading it. And Carl, you want to shamelessly plug your book as you can announce your book?
I was going to ask Brandon, is your book nearing completion, or is it finished? The writing aspect of it, is it just like being packaged now?
Revisions. We're right there. We're getting there. Almost there.
To get to you a copy of my book, I didn't know until recently that you and Mustafa had come so close to the completion of your book. I'd like to offer my book as just to have, to consult, because I am the author of Shadow Realms Demonology Handbook. And it's not the definitive work on demonology by any means, but it's my take on it and some of my experiences. So, try to get you a copy of that.
Yeah, I'd love that. I'd love
Especially
to read
that chapter, Beware Those Dolls, parts 1 and 2.
Oh, okay. There we go.
That's a fun read.
Sounds like a great read.
Yeah, it's precisely 300 pages. It's not a monstrous book. It's a compendium, but it's got essays and case histories in it.
Great.
And
fantastic.
Demonic and angelic names. So yeah, try to get that to you.
All right.
I love that.
We're getting to the final 5 minutes, so let's get another question or two if we can before. And Brandon, of course, we'll have to get you on again for part 2 and science and demons part 2.
Let's get them on next week. No, soon.
Get them on soon. Elise?
Okay, here's a question that you can speculate on because there probably is no real answer. Are ghosts of demons truly eternal, or might they simply fade out with the passing of time and lack of people's interest in them?
Ooh, that's a good question. It's hard. I guess we could speculate on that all day and really think about that. But who knows? Who knows? I mean, when we go into a location, we may be encountering an entity from 100 years ago, but who knows if it's an entity from even further before that? I mean, 1,000 years, 2,000 years, who knows? So It's hard. It's hard to know. I guess the more we start to open ourselves up to that scientific scrutiny, collecting this data and empirical evidence, the more factual information we have that we can really correlate and find a pattern, I think we'll have more answers to that, hopefully. But that's tough. I guess it's mainly speculation in that situation.
Carl?
Yeah. Puff the magic dragon
down by the sea.
Yeah. Then a dragon lives forever, but not so little boys. Then one day it happened, Johnny Paper came no more. So, Puff the magic dragon just slid away because he wasn't believed in anymore. Maybe it's like that with demons. I think if they are not fed, I think they go away. And many of these entities, like ghosts, you don't care about them, you don't think about them anymore, you don't believe in them. They just do it now. I think they fade. Or they go someplace else.
Yeah, I think a term that people have nowadays that they've been tending to use is a term called collective consciousness. And I think if in that realm, if we stop thinking about these things, maybe there is a possibility that these things won't linger, won't bother us anymore.
Yeah,
so there's a possibility.
Ties in with the writings of Carl Gustav Jung that we share a collective unconscious or subconscious, and maybe if that channel is shut off, it loses power.
Most definitely.
We can't respond to them anymore. They can't respond to us.
At least let's get one more question.
Let's see. Let's get one more question. I've been scrolling through. Brandon, what is your favorite piece of equipment?
Oh, I'd have to say probably the EMCCD camera. It's the electron multiplying camera. And this camera is used by the digital imaging scientific community to record single photon events. And photon events are light events, right, that happen all throughout the universe and carry electromagnetic energy with them. The brilliant mathematician, Dr. Penrose, believes that these photons do retain consciousness, which is something that's interesting. So this camera records those photon events, single photon events, and it's a camera I've used in the field multiple times and have collected very significant data that shows that maybe the possible mechanics behind a manifestation of what we perceive to be ghosts or entities are photon events. And that's something I've been working on with Dr. Klor and various engineers, and something I continue to do to this day and look forward to getting back out there and continuing that research. So I'd probably have to say the electron multiplying camera.
Wow, that's interesting. I was just reading about photons today. What a coincidence.
The questions are ghosts more photonic than electronic? They respond to and influence electricity, electrical currents, but perhaps they're more of a photonic substance. In that sense, yeah.
Right, exactly. It's something we have to look into, and we've seen, a common pattern and a correlation in these haunted places where eyewitnesses are having these, these extensive reports, and we've encountered multiple photon events in these locations, and they've interacted differently every time, which is interesting. So obviously, we've used this camera in a dozen locations or so, and only I think 4 of those locations throughout the United States we've recorded photon events in these locations. So there's something to it. I think so there's definitely something to it. And we actually, one thing I started to do was use a data logger in conjunction. So I was trying to see if there was any environmental changes associated with these photon events, and we started to see a trend that anytime these photon events would manifest or start to take place, we would see pressure changes in the room, which is something that even Dr. Penrose talked about, as well as other brilliant, scientists, that when they talk about black holes and photons and things of that nature, that there's tremendous pressure changes associated with that. So maybe it's this piece of the universe that's happening. Who knows? But I think it's something we have to look into further.
Yeah. Do photons retain memory?
That's the question.
But do they?
That's the question.
Memory.
That's something we have to look into.
Do this, Yeah, like that. I was doing that.
Well, Brandon, we of course hit our. It goes fast when you have a great discussion.
And an enthralling guest.
Yeah, and of course a great moderator.
Yes.
Great partner in Carl. And before we get off, and we hope to have you for a part 2, of course, if you'd like to be on again.
Absolutely.
Is there anything that you're working on besides your book that you would like to talk about? Maybe ways people can contact you, if you don't mind?
Yeah, I know anything I'm doing right now or in the future, you can find at brandonjalvis.com. All social media, Brandon Alvis. So working on some new stuff. Very excited to announce that hopefully here in the near future. But yeah, brandonjalvis.com is where you can find all that information.
Guys, thank you for listening tonight. Thank you, Mama, for putting his website on. If you guys want to reach out to us, you can reach out to us by, of course, what's scrolling on the bottom, demonology.org, which is still crazy to me. We have that
we just
name.
found, that was accessible. That domain has not been snatched up.
Mind blown. But yeah, reach us out, demonology.org. We do take on cases. We are having a few events, like we said at the beginning of the show. If you're interested, please go on our webpage. And of course, we'll announce this weekend what our topic will be next week for Do a Daemonology podcast. Elise, Carl, Brandon, thank you for having me.
And thank you, James.
Thank you, James. Thank you, Brandon. Good to see you.
Brandon, pleasure talking with you.
All right, guys, have a great night. Everybody that's listening, have a great night.